national security threat issues. I've watched the emerging narrative that Di Soldado Cabello, the head of Venezuela's National Assembly, who is the target of a series of investigations by U.S. federal prosecutors and the Drug Enforcement Agency, putting aside recent meetings by the State Department and pictures with Cabello, I'm concerned that the investigations are bringing into greater focus how the drug trade is penetrating the highest levels of the Venezuelan state. So, is the current situation in Venezuela a national security threat to the United States?
I think that the current situation in Venezuela is of great concern to the United States. Whether it is a national security threat to the United States, I would not say. We have made clear, as we did in the sanctions.
You would say it is not a national security threat?
I would not say it is a national security threat in the sense that drug trafficking is overall a national security threat to the United States. As we've said in our reports annually, the government of Venezuela is not cooperating with us on that issue.
Okay, so what's changed from your testimony on May 8th of last year when I asked you a very similar question, and your answer to me was, I think the answer to that question is that it is a very serious concern to us, a national security threat?
Well, as I just said, I think drug trafficking overall is a national security threat to the United States.
I wasn't asking about drug trafficking overall in that question, nor in this question. I was asking you about Venezuela. You told me on May the 8th of 2014 that it was a national security threat. Why is it less so today?
Whether the words are exactly the same in this day or then, I think the concerns that we have about Venezuela and about drug trafficking are the same. We have concerns about how much drugs may be coming through or out of Venezuela into the United States. And we are going to continue to act to keep them from coming here.
I think even the president, under his determination, cites a national security threat. One last question. You know, when I have individuals who are brought before the committee for the advice and consent of the Senate, I take it very seriously. And one of the elements that I take very seriously is that I'm going to get fair, honest, transparent answers to my questions so that I can make judgments in the issues that I'm called upon as a United States Senator and as a senior member of this committee to make judgments on. When in a hearing on Venezuela, in the same hearing that you told me was a national security threat, I asked you whether or not the opposition in Cuba, as you had stated, was actually opposed to us pursuing sanctions. Your answer to me at that time was the opposition elements engaged in the current dialogue have suggested we refrain from sanctions against individuals guilty of human rights violations. Now, that was not the case, and you ultimately made it very difficult for me at a moment that I was trying to understand what would be the consequences. I thought that the sanctions that ultimately the president signed were the right ones, but you created a doubt in me, a doubt that shouldn't have been there, because then I heard a chorus from the opposition in Venezuela who said, no, we never said that. So if I'm going to look to advise and consent and vote affirmatively for someone, I need honest and open and transparent answers. And I don't feel that I got that from you at that time. And so can you explain to me why I should feel that if I were to vote for you to be the U.S. ambassador to Mexico, a critical country in our relationship for which we have a whole host of issues, that I would feel that I was getting open and transparent answers?
Senator, I guess one of the things I would say is I would look to the response of the opposition after the sanctions were passed, when they publicly rejected those sanctions. And I would suggest that there were different answers from different members of the opposition, and they were in an extremely difficult situation. And what I told you was what I had heard from some of them. But after it was said publicly, it put them in an extremely difficult position, which I had not intended to put them in. But it was never a misstatement to you of what I had heard. And
Well,
it is
you
not.
asked to clarify the record, and even your clarification then is not what you're telling me now. When you asked to clarify the record, which I allowed you to do when I was then the chairman, you said, "I'd like to clarify one point I made during the hearing. The opposition elements engaged in the current dialogue have not specifically suggested we refrain from sanctions against individuals guilty of human rights violations." Now,
Because those in the dialogue had not. It was others who were outside the dialogue. And that was why I did not want to cause problems for those who were within the dialogue.
but you didn't even in your clarification give me that statement that you gave me now. And so I have a real problem, and one of the most important assignments in the Western Hemisphere, other than the one that you presently possess, about whether I'm going to get open, honest, and transparent answers, and that's a problem for me. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your time.